let's look more broadly at the role of an association now. Do you think that, given that there is this new reality, that associations need to adapt their message, speak in a different way? Or is it the case that you have one clear message and you keep on repeating it?
You know what? I sometimes bump into these colleagues in town, and you get that feeling of, you said exactly the same thing last time I met you. Now you're saying the same thing, and you might even have put a little bit on top. Either you weren't successful in getting your message across, or you're doing what I call habitual advocacy, which is to repeat your message even when the reality has changed. And the most important part of being a lobbyist is to be a credible counterpart for politicians, to make sure that they understand at the moment you start the conversation that you understand their world.
How is it credible if you're changing your message to suit the reality?
Well, because policies need to start with what is the reality. The realities of the power sector and the challenges of the power sector are very different today than they were 5 years ago. 5 years ago, there wasn't enough happening on renewables. We didn't have the right targets. We didn't have an alignment with science. The challenge today is that the influx of renewables on the grid is so big that it actually is many orders of magnitude bigger than what is needed. Just to take one country, not in the EU, but the UK has a connection pipeline of 700 gigawatts of capacity. That is many orders of magnitudes more than the country needs. The total capacity of the country is right around 100 gigawatts today, if I remember right. And that means the challenges are different. The problem has changed. So therefore, your message needs to change. I mean, imagine, you go and tell your wife, I want a car. You get a car and then you're a little bit broke. And next day you come and say again, I want a car. She's going to think, are you crazy? You're doing habitual advocacy. You forgot that you actually got what you asked for.
Habitual advocacy is another way to say that. Tick the box advocacy.
I'll think about that. I'll think of that and maybe include it in my vocabulary.
Let's get into that a bit. I know that this is a phenomenon. This comes from members. This comes from association leaders not being leaders, not leading their members, not informing them enough about the political realities, and just accepting their list of demands, which are often too many anyway, and then playing the role of pretending to say that they can actually help influence the process so that those demands can be achieved. But this is a typical association experience, which makes me wonder whether associations are the right vehicle to really advance political change. What do you think about that?
Well, now I understand what you mean by tick the box advocacy, and I really like that expression actually, because one common mistake of players that are far from the political reality is that they take too much point of departure in whatever interests they feel they have themselves. You absolutely need to be clear about that and know that, but what we do, and which is extremely valuable for our clients or members, is that we translate that into policy language. If you come with a long list of complaints to policymakers and a long list of asks without explaining why is this important, not for you, but for society, you have no chance of succeeding, and you won't spend much time in the room with the decision makers. If you can come into that room instead and say, here's the political problem of Europe, and here's how I can help you solve it, they're very interested in listening. And then all of a sudden, your list of demands might become much more relevant. You'll never succeed with all of it, hopefully, because that means that you probably were too successful. But you can succeed with much more if you're able to relate to the political reality. And that's what we specialize in here in town.